I love Spider-Man. And for the first 15 years of my life, he was the GOAT. That is until. But he's for another video. Spidey's comics were awesome. His cartoons were awesome. Yes, even that one on MTV. And most importantly, his movies. The Sam Raimi trilogy made me feel the same way a lot of people felt when seeing Richard Donner's Superman. Now, I know it wasn't the movie's tagline, but it really did make me believe a man could swing.
Wait, that did not sound... Okay. Whoa.
When it comes to the medium of TV animation, Spidey has had a bit of a dry season. After the tragedy that was the cancellation of Spectacular Spider-Man, we got a couple duds. Ultimate Spider-Man and Marvel's Spider-Man completely missed the mark, which I believe was a synergistic byproduct of being owned by Disney. The MCU was at the absolute height of its popularity, and they wanted all the shows to mirror that voice and aesthetic. Then, in 2022, came the announcement of a new show, which, while admittedly having a nice art style, left me feeling only apathy. Marvel animation as a whole had been pretty bad for the last decade or so. From Hulk and the Agents of Smash, to that Guardians of the Galaxy show, to that lame Avengers show that got the actual good Avengers show canceled. The success of the MCU truly had become the bane of its animation department. And then, in 2024, we finally got a trailer, and it looked promising. By this time, I'd also seen X-Men 97 and loved it. I'll link that below in case you want to hear my thoughts. But one good show in an ocean of mediocrity did not whet my appetites for the future. The Marvel show What If had also come out, and it was mediocre at best. So nothing short of excellent word of mouth was going to get my oh so precious eyeballs. Then I heard sounds. And what's that new Spider-Man show? It's very on YouTube.
Well, I really liked it.
This is a really solid Spider-Man show. Not spectacular, mind you, but really good. To set the stage for y'all, this show is basically a combination of two what-if stories. What if Spider-Man had been recruited by Norman Osborn instead of Tony Stark? And what if Spider-Man got his powers after Uncle Ben's death? AKA, what if we had a Spider-Man that did not live by the mantra, with great power
comes great responsibility.
The show dared to ask, what is Spider-Man without his iconic origin? And their answer? Well, we'll get to that later. First, let's start with the... This show has a great supporting cast of characters. From a young Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone, to Nico Minoru, aka Sister Grimm of The Runaways, to the most interesting take on Norman Osborn since Willem Dafoe. This Norman carries himself with this Clancy Brown Lex Luthor energy, minus the obvious nefarious intent, and voice acted to absolute perfection by Coleman Domingo. And while we're on the subject of voice acting, everyone in this show is excellent. So excellent, in fact, that it made up for some otherwise flat facial animation. All the characters were very likable, and I love that none of them felt designed to stir up contrived drama. Miko, however, was definitely wandering close to some toxic Lois Lane territory, but luckily they swerved before crashing into a wall of superhero cliches, which takes us seamlessly into the next aspect, the This is a very crisp 10-episode season. Every episode felt necessary, and there was no plotline that had me longing to get back to another I actually cared about. And the way they wrapped it all up in the last episode gave the season a nice bit of symmetry. However, when it comes to answering that question I mentioned earlier, that question of, what is Spider-Man without his iconic origin? The answer the writers came up with was,
It's so dumb.
pretty much the same as the original version. Which, if you think about it, makes Uncle Ben's death seem pretty inconsequential. The original Peter, aka Peter Prime, was a resentful nerd who had to learn to keep his selfishness in check after he got his uncle killed. This new Peter is, for the most part, an absolute saint that never gets bullied, therefore giving him no reason to be resentful, therefore giving him no reason to have ever made that original mistake, even if he was presented with the opportunity.
It's the part where that's my problem.
Yes, he's sad about Uncle Ben's death, but he doesn't seem to carry any guilt over it.
Things have been different without having Uncle Ben around, but you've always been here for me. You've always had my back, and I really appreciate that.
His regular life is not difficult, nor does he have that Parker luck that constantly keeps ruining his relationships. And most importantly, there's no specific reason why he chose to be a superhero. He gets his powers, and then we just flash forward 3 months to him doing his Spider-Man thing. Maybe they'll reveal the catalyst in season 2, but as of right now, his journey in the show is not one of responsibility, but instead a shallow version of self-actualization, the process of realizing one's fullest potential by pursuing personal growth, creativity, and self-fulfillment. New Peter's only personal growth is the proficiency of how he uses his powers in battle.
That's a choice.
They did remove his spider sense, for the most part, making his fights a lot more difficult. He's constantly getting caught off guard by villains who somehow know how to use advanced technology to its max potential within minutes of getting it. It's a bit of a cheat that honestly wouldn't have bothered me if Peter hadn't been so clumsy after 3 months of practice with his powers. Now let's talk about Lonnie for a minute. Lonnie Lincoln's storyline with the 1/10th gang was also lacking for me. The setup was solid. The problem was that I never really felt Lonnie's growing bond with this gang. They try to build this bond as Lonnie saves the leader and the gang helps to keep him safe, but those moments just aren't that emotionally powerful. So when the time comes for the gang to rally around him, it just feels contrived. The character also isn't lacking any love or familiar support at home. He has 2 healthy, loving parents. So that factor ends up negating the familial hold that a gang is typically supposed to fill. To illustrate this point, let's talk about the Foot Clan from the 90s Ninja Turtles movie. In the film, the Foot Clan is made up of teenage runaways. The leader, Shredder, gives them shelter and lets them do pretty much whatever they want, under the condition that they steal stuff for him. But there's this moment where he promotes one of them, and you can really feel the sense of brotherhood, a familial bond. And while we all know that he's obviously evil, you understand that he's giving these boys something important, something they don't feel they're getting at home. I feel none of this in Lonnie's story, nor do I feel the tragedy of Lonnie giving up his entire future for the sake of his brother. A brother, I might add, stops mattering at like the halfway point. And the show treats all that gang stuff with kid gloves. They don't sell drugs, or weapons, or stolen property, or even deal in human trafficking. They just occasionally get into fistfights with other gangs like it's West Side Story. It felt like they wanted to tackle serious material but weren't allowed. And I'll just say this. If the higher-ups don't want The Wire, then don't try to give me a Kidz Bop version of it. The 90s show had the same problem. The Punisher wasn't allowed to kill criminals, and Blade wasn't allowed to kill vampires, so...
What's the point?
It also feels inconsistent with Disney's brand because X-Men 97 was allowed to go there. But they were allowed to do this? But maybe that kill was like their one F word in a PG-13 movie.
Go f yourself.
The tones in this show are just so imbalanced and inconsistent. Words I'd also use to describe. Now, for the record, I'm a big fan of the MTV Spider-Man show, so the 3D style was never going to be an immediate turnoff for me. So when I finally watched the show, it actually looked fine as a whole. The facial animations were still a bit stiff, but I heard rumors that this show was originally supposed to be 2D, so maybe they were forced to split the baby and got the mediocrity of both worlds. I love the show's use of comic panels for its transitions as well as important action beats. The swinging looked pretty good despite the sometimes completely empty city streets, and the action was pretty well paced, with the choreography ranging from bad to pretty great. Anything involving special technology or superpowers generally look pretty great. Love this axe kick, by the way. The Daredevil fight was well executed, but a little weightless. Observe as the helicopter propellers barely even bend while they fight atop, and the lack of dust that's kicked up when characters land or fall robs the fight of any real potential impact. The best fights, by far, involve the Scorpion. I really appreciate when they let Spidey get rocked hard. He's always been an underdog, and underdogs work best when they have to struggle to get back up after taking a flying knee to the face or a grenade. And the fact that this beatdown was allowed to happen gave me hope for the future. Now, that being said, Peter should be dead. When Scorpion stabbed this first guy, he was gone instantly. But when Scorpion makes Spider-Man catch this steel beam, a steel beam he could have easily avoided, by the way.
Come on, move, kid.
Scorpion has the biggest kill window in the history of mankind, but decides to hit a non-vital organ instead. Such a considerate insect. But bringing it back to the positive, the police raid on Doc Ock was super fun, and the team up with Doctor Strange also did not disappoint. But those regular people fights were... Boo-boo! Nobody's allowed to have guns except in one scene where they're absolutely useless. And only one person gets stabbed with a knife, and it's in a completely safe, non-lethal part of their body. Now, I must state this again. None of this would have bothered me if they hadn't teased me with this earlier. But my foot needs healing from kicking this dead horse, so let's move on to. All in all, this was a solid Spider-Man show. My biggest gripe, however, is that this show just isn't different enough. It wants to take a different path with the Norman Osborn storyline and the almost completely new supporting cast, but it also wants to be connected to the MCU by addressing the Civil War stuff, having Charlie Cox as Daredevil, making Aunt May look just like Marissa Tomei, and directing Hudson Thames to imitate Tom Holland in his performance.
Sorry, I'm Peter Parker. How about you?
What? What are you doing? Hey, I'm Peter.
It wants synergy with a universe it will have no effect on because it's already going down its own timeline. They want to see what if Norman Osborn instead of Tony Stark premise, but then pretty much abandon everything else. Why isn't Peter still friends with Ned? Why remove the Uncle Ben catalyst if it's not going to be replaced by something as equally compelling? Why does Peter still need to wear glasses when Tom Holland doesn't? I'll tell you why. It's because they're trying to do a half Steve Ditko Spider-Man, half MCU Spider-Man. And it just doesn't work. If I were to give one creative note to showrunner Jeff Tremble for season 2, it would be, if you want to be different, then be different. Also, could we at some point get a Spider-Man that isn't in high school? I swear, this dude is like Peter Pan. They will not let this kid grow up.